There's a glossy black SUV idling outside an apartment building. The kind with the big chrome grille, the blacked out windows, and a monthly payment that quietly screams success. Behind the wheel sits someone wearing a watch worth more than a month of rent, scrolling on a phone with a cracked screen they keep meaning to fix but can't quite justify the cost. Now follow that person inside, up the stairs, past the neighbors, into a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor, a folding chair, and a refrigerator holding one energy drink and a takeout container from 3 days ago. Same human being. Two completely different stories, and which one you believe depends entirely on which part of the picture you're allowed to see. That gap, the distance between what a person shows you and what's actually sitting in their bank account, is wider in 2026 than it has ever been in history. Borrowing money has never been this easy. Looking rich has never been this cheap. And telling the difference between someone who has real wealth and someone wearing a really convincing costume has never mattered more. Because the people doing the pretending have a way of pulling everyone around them into the same expensive trap. To set the stage, consider where the country actually stands right now. Total household debt in America has pushed past $18 trillion, a fresh record. Credit cards alone account for well over $1 trillion of that. Car loans, another $1.6 trillion and climbing. The savings rate is sliding while the spending keeps accelerating. We are, collectively, in the strangest financial moment I can remember. One where almost everyone looks more prosperous than they've ever looked, and a huge share of those same people are quietly more fragile than they've ever been. That contradiction is the soil the entire fake rich phenomenon grows out of. So today I'm going to walk you through 10 signs that someone is fake rich. Not broke, not struggling quietly, fake rich, which is its own very specific condition. It means spending like the money has already arrived when it absolutely has not. It means building a life out of appearances and financing the whole thing with debt nobody can see. By the time we get to the end, you'll be able to spot it in seconds, sometimes from a single sentence someone says. And more importantly, you'll be able to hold the same list up to your own life like a mirror. Because here's the uncomfortable part. A lot of us are already one or two signs deep without ever having noticed. Let's start with the thing parked out front, because it's almost always the first purchase someone makes when they want the world to think they've made it. Number 10. The car costs more than the entire life around it. A car is the perfect fake rich starter kit because it does 3 jobs at once. It's loud, it goes everywhere you go, and absolutely everyone sees it the moment you pull up. On top of that, in nearly every case it's financed, which is a polite way of saying the person driving it didn't actually have the money sitting there. They just had access to a loan and a willingness to sign for it. In 2026, the average new car sold in America runs right around $49,000. I want to be clear that's not the luxury number. That's the ordinary, middle-of-the-road, nothing special average. And the typical monthly payment on a financed new vehicle just climbed to a record high of about $770. Slow down and really feel that figure. $770 every single month. And that's before you add insurance, before gas, before the first surprise repair bill shows up. For a huge number of households, that payment is basically a second rent. It gets worse, too, because more than 1 in 5 people financing a new car are now carrying a monthly payment of $1,000 or higher. The $1,000 car payment used to be a rare, almost cartoonish thing reserved for exotic sports cars. Today, it's a club with millions of dues-paying members, and most of them can't really afford the membership. Here's where the fake part reveals itself. The person with genuine money who buys a $50,000 car usually structured it so the payment barely registers against their income. It's a rounding error in their month. The person who's faking it stretched, reached, and contorted their entire budget to fit into the same car. And the loan terms always give them away. Almost 40% of buyers who are already underwater on their current car are now financing the next one over 84 months. 7 full years of payments on a machine that starts losing value the instant it rolls off the lot. And that points to the quiet catastrophe sitting underneath all of it, which is negative equity. In early 2026, roughly 30% of people trading in a vehicle owed more on it than the thing was actually worth, and the average gap had ballooned past $7,000. Now, here's what people in that position tend to do. They don't pay off the difference. They roll it forward into the next loan, and then the next one after that, dragging old debt behind them like a trailer they can't unhitch. The buyers rolling negative equity into a fresh loan are now averaging payments well over $900 a month and financing $55,000 or more just to keep moving. So the next time an expensive car pulls up, hold off on being impressed. Ask yourself the quiet question instead. Does the rest of this person's life rise to the level of the car? Or is the car the single nice thing parked proudly in front of everything that isn't nice at all? Because real wealth tends to look boringly consistent. Fake wealth tends to have one shiny object and a lot of shadows behind it. Number 9. Everything is brand new and every label is turned to face you. Step into the home of someone with old, settled, generational money, and the experience can be genuinely underwhelming. The couch is excellent, but a little worn in. The watch is nice, but you might not even recognize the maker. The art on the wall isn't shouting at you. Nothing in the room is trying to win an argument. Now step into the home of someone who's fake rich, and it's the exact reverse. The logos are enormous. Half the items still look like the tags came off yesterday. Everything seems specifically chosen so that you, the visitor, will notice it and silently run the math on what it must have cost. For a few years, the fashion world worshipped the understated version of this. They called it quiet luxury, all soft neutral tones and zero visible branding, an aesthetic borrowed straight from old money families who never needed to prove anything. Heading into 2026, the pendulum has swung hard the other direction, back toward what the industry now calls loud luxury. Big logos, saturated color, statement pieces engineered to be photographed and recognized from across a room. Let me be fair here. There's nothing wrong with loving nice things, or bold things, or bright things. The logo by itself is not the crime. The tell is when the visible spending isn't backed by anything underneath it. Genuine wealth buys the bag and then forgets the bag exists. Manufactured wealth buys the bag and desperately needs you to see the bag because the bag has a job to do. It's a piece of evidence in a case the person is constantly trying to make about who they are. And in 2026, here's the detail that quietly demolishes the whole performance. A massive share of what's being shown off isn't even real. Survey after survey keeps finding that something like 7 in 10 younger shoppers regularly buy dupes, the cheaper look-alike versions of name brand products. You can grab a handbag that mimics a designer one for $25 or $30 at an ordinary store now, and the communities online dedicated to finding these lookalikes have exploded in size. I genuinely want to defend the dupe for a second, because buying one to save money can be a smart, self-aware move. The person who openly says, "Yeah, this is a lookalike, I saved $300 and I don't care," is honestly playing the game better than anyone. They've seen through the illusion entirely. The fake rich person is the opposite of that. They pass the lookalike off as the genuine article. Or worse, they refuse to buy the affordable version at all and instead put the real 4-figure bag on a credit card they're already buried under, all to keep the story believable for an audience. And the whole performance has gotten communal, which is part of why it's spreading so fast. There are entire online communities, some of which have grown by half in the span of a single year, dedicated to hunting down the closest possible lookalikes for designer pieces. The quiet luxury aesthetic that ruled a couple of years back was itself borrowed straight from old money families who genuinely never needed a logo. And now, even that restrained look has its own ecosystem of dupes. When the entire wardrobe is a performance staged for strangers, the performance becomes the whole point of getting dressed in the morning. And performances, it turns out, are exhausting and expensive to keep running every single day, especially when half the props are financed. Number 8, they pay for absolutely everything in 4 easy installments. This sign is newer than the others, and over the last few years, it has completely exploded. Buy now, pay later. Those friendly little checkout buttons that chop a purchase into 4 payments and make a $100 thing feel like it only costs $25. By 2026, well over 90 million Americans are using these services, and on the surface, that's not automatically a problem. Splitting a single, big, planned purchase into manageable chunks can be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But look closely at what's actually being financed this way, and the story turns dark fast. Roughly 1 in 4 people using these plans now report using them to buy groceries. Groceries. That number sat closer to 1 in 7 just a year earlier, which means it's climbing fast. Read it twice because it tells you everything in a single line. A growing share of people aren't borrowing for a sofa or a vacation anymore. They're borrowing for food because the money runs out before the month does, and the gap has to be filled with something. The cracks are getting harder to hide, too. As of early 2026, close to half of all buy now, pay later users admit they've paid at least one of these installments late in the past year, a number that keeps creeping higher. More than half of users confess they couldn't actually make ends meet without these plans quietly propping up their spending. A large chunk are juggling several of these loans at the same time. 4 payments owed here, 4 payments owed there, with due dates scattered across the calendar like little landmines waiting to go off. And there's a cruel twist on top of it all. The majority of people using these services wrongly believe they're building their credit score by doing so, when in reality, most of these plans never report your on-time payments to anyone. They get all the risk and none of the reward. So how does this help you spot someone who's fake rich? Watch how they handle a completely normal small purchase. Dinner out, a concert ticket, a pair of sneakers. The person who's genuinely fine just pays and moves on with their evening. The person who's faking it reaches for the installment plan on something small and ordinary, because paying the full price today, in one go, would actually hurt. They've quietly turned their entire existence into a stack of subscriptions. Nearly every nice thing they own is still secretly being paid off in the background. They don't own the lifestyle at all. They're renting it, 4 payments at a time, and the bill never truly stops arriving. Number 7. The credit card never actually gets paid off. Here's a strange truth about credit cards. Used correctly, they're basically free money plus points and protection. Used incorrectly, they become one of the most punishingly expensive forms of debt a regular person can carry. The fake rich individual almost always uses them the second way, and they hide it beautifully, because a credit card looks completely identical whether you wipe the balance clean every month or whether you're slowly drowning underneath it. The 2026 backdrop here is genuinely rough. Americans are collectively carrying roughly $1.25 trillion in credit card debt. The average household balance is hovering somewhere near $11,000, and the interest rates have become brutal, with the typical card charging around 21% and brand new offers pushing closer to 24%. At those rates, a balance you fail to pay off doesn't just sit there politely waiting for you. It compounds. It grows while you sleep, while you work, while you scroll, quietly eating future money to pay for past purchases. Now here comes the tell. The fake rich person will gladly flex the purchase, but will never, ever mention the aftermath. They'll show you the $1,000 night out in vivid detail. What they will not show you is that they're now paying the minimum on that night for the next 2 years, handing the bank hundreds of extra dollars in interest for the privilege of having looked wealthy for one single evening. Compare that to how real wealth operates. Genuinely wealthy people treat the credit card as a simple tool. They swipe it, they pay it in full, and they never think about it again. The fake rich treat it as a phantom extension of their income, a magical way to spend money that hasn't been earned yet, and in a lot of cases, never will be. If you ever want to gently pressure test someone, the question is almost embarrassingly simple, and it's devastating in its honesty. Just ask, casually, "Do you carry a balance?" The way they answer reveals the entire truth, because there's a universe of difference between the person who runs $10,000 through a card each month and clears it completely, and the person who's been stuck at a $10,000 balance for years, treading water at 21% interest. From the outside, standing in the same checkout line, those two people look exactly alike. On the inside, one of them is steadily building something, and the other one is quietly bleeding out. And the scale of this isn't small. Fewer than half of American cardholders manage to pay their balance in full each month, which means a vast number of people walking around looking perfectly comfortable are actually renting that comfort from a bank at one of the highest interest rates in the entire economy. Number 6. They cannot survive a single bad week. This is the sign that hides the very best, and it also happens to be the one that matters most of all. Forget the car for a moment. Forget the clothes, the watches, the vacations. Just ask one clean question. If this person's income stopped tomorrow morning, how long could they actually last? For a staggering number of people who look successful, the honest answer is almost no time whatsoever. Survey after survey throughout 2026 keeps landing on the same uncomfortable finding. Something like half of all Americans earning over $100,000 a year say they're living paycheck to paycheck. Even among people pulling in $200,000 or more, better than a third say the exact same thing. A recent national poll found that 1 in 3 six-figure earners now describe themselves as financially distressed, and 2 out of every 3 say a six-figure salary doesn't even feel like wealth anymore. Among people earning over $300,000, a clear majority report struggling with credit card debt. Read that one more time. $300,000 a year, and they're fighting their credit cards. There's even a name for these folks now: Henrys. It stands for High Earners Not Rich Yet. Big paycheck, big lifestyle, and almost nothing left at the end of the month. The money comes marching in the front door and walks straight out the back into car payments, lease payments, installment plans, and dinners they posted about for an audience. The national savings rate quietly confirms the whole picture. Americans are now saving only about 4% of their income, down sharply from over 6% just a couple of years earlier. People are earning more than ever and somehow keeping less of it than before. It helps to picture what broke at a six-figure salary actually looks like on a normal Wednesday, because it isn't dramatic. There's no obvious disaster. It's a beautiful kitchen with almost no food in it. It's a closet full of nice clothes attached to a checking account that dips under $100 2 days before payday, every payday, like clockwork. And it's worth knowing that this top slice of earners is doing a remarkable amount of the country's spending. The highest earning 10% of Americans now account for nearly half of all consumer spending, the largest share in decades. A lot of that spending looks like wealth from the outside. A meaningful chunk of it is actually fear, fueled by debt, wearing a very nice outfit. So the genuine tell of fake rich has nothing to do with anything you can see in a photo. It's the emergency that never happens on camera, the transmission that drops out of the car, the medical bill nobody planned for, the 2 unpaid weeks between one job and the next. The truly wealthy person absorbs that hit with a shrug and a savings account that was built for exactly this moment. The fake rich person absorbs it with a brand new credit card, a frantic installment plan, or a quiet, slightly desperate text asking a friend to spot them until Friday. Same lifestyle glowing on the surface, completely different ground underneath their feet, and only one of them is standing on something solid. If you're still with me here, this is right around the halfway point, and I'll be honest, the signs coming up next are the ones people misread the most often. One of them in particular flips everything you assume about wealth completely upside down, so it's worth sticking around for the back half. Number 5, they never, ever stop talking about money. You would assume the people sitting on the most money would be the ones talking about it constantly. In reality, it's almost perfectly backwards. Quiet, genuine wealth tends to be, well, quiet. There's no internal need to announce the number out loud, because the number isn't doing any emotional heavy lifting. It just sits there in the background, calm and unbothered, being money. The fake rich person cannot stop bringing it up. They'll tell you what something cost before you've even thought to ask. They casually slip the price of the watch into a story that had nothing to do with the watch. They mention the trip, the bottle service, the hotel suite, the investment they just got into, and there's always, always a dollar figure stapled to it. Every single story somehow winds its way back to an amount. Once you understand what's really happening, it all clicks into place, because the talking itself is the product they're selling. They aren't describing their wealth to you. They're manufacturing the impression of wealth, live, in real time, using words, because words are dramatically cheaper than the actual things. Watch for the announcement reflex too, because it's a dead giveaway. The genuinely comfortable person buys something nice and then simply uses it. The fake rich person buys something nice and immediately posts it, captions it, angles it in the light, and waits for the reaction to roll in. Because the reaction was the entire reason for the purchase. The thing itself was almost incidental. It wasn't bought for them. It was bought for you, and for everyone scrolling past you. Strip the audience out of the equation, and a huge percentage of those purchases would simply never happen in the first place. There's a quietly beautiful test buried in all of this. Pay attention to how a person talks about money when absolutely nothing is on the line, when there's no one around worth impressing. The secure person barely brings it up at all, because for them it's just a tool, like a wrench or a stove. The person who's performing can't help themselves even in private, because for them, being perceived as rich isn't a pleasant side effect of having money. It is the entire job. And it's a job that, tragically, never lets them clock out and go home. Number 4, they lease the backdrop. This is the signature move of the social media era, and once it's pointed out to you, I promise you cannot unsee it for the rest of your life. The mansion glowing in the photo is a rental, booked by the hour specifically for a photo shoot. The private jet in the post is a grounded, parked plane that companies literally rent out by the minute for staged pictures. No actual flight included anywhere in the package. The luxury car in the video is a rental from an app or a quick favor from a friend with a nicer ride. The designer shopping haul gets filmed, posted, celebrated, and then quietly returned to the store the very next morning for a full refund. None of this is wealth. It's set dressing, the same way a movie set is built to look like a real house and is actually just painted plywood held up from behind. The fake rich person has gotten genuinely, professionally good at renting the symbols of a life they do not live, because the symbols are what generate the likes, and the likes start to feel almost identical to the life itself. The mansion they posted from costs more for one weekend than they'll earn in an entire month. The trip was sliced into 4 installments. The bottle held up triumphantly in the club photo was the only thing they bought all night, hoisted into frame just long enough to capture the image before it went back down untouched. I want to carefully separate two things here, because they look identical from the outside, and they could not be more different in spirit. Renting things you couldn't otherwise access can be a completely fine, even joyful experience. Renting a fun car for a road trip is just a nice choice that hurts no one. The fake rich version is renting the symbol for the specific purpose of deceiving people, to manufacture a wealth that simply isn't there, and then making real financial decisions, taking on real and lasting debt in order to keep that manufactured image alive and fed. That's the exact moment the performance stops being harmless fun and starts quietly devouring the actual person standing behind the curtain. The deepest tell here is consistency, or rather, the total absence of it. Real wealth is reassuringly boring and consistent. It's the same comfortable life on a random rainy Tuesday with nobody watching and no camera rolling. Fake wealth is a disconnected string of highlights with nothing underneath linking them into a coherent whole. One week, it's a yacht in crystal water, and the next week, the same person is asking to split a $12 lunch 4 ways. The highlight reel never quite adds up to a believable life because it was never designed to be a life. It was only ever designed to be content, and content has to keep escalating or the audience drifts away. Number 3, they own nothing that's boring. Now we arrive at the absolute heart of the whole thing, and this is the sign that cleanly separates the merely flashy from the genuinely, quietly wealthy. Here's the secret almost nobody flexing on the internet wants to say out loud. Real wealth is built almost entirely on boring things. I'm talking about index funds that nobody ever bothers to photograph, retirement accounts that make for terrible content, a house with the mortgage finally paid down, and a quiet stake in some business that keeps earning money whether or not the owner bothers to show up that day. Assets, in other words. The deeply unsexy stuff that quietly generates money while you sleep and stays completely invisible to anyone glancing at you across a parking lot. The fake rich person owns precisely none of that. Every dollar that passes through their hands flows directly into something that either loses value or actively costs money to keep alive. The car, the clothes, the trips, the gadgets, the whole glittering lifestyle. Nothing they own is working for them. Everything they own is working against them, slowly leaking out the bottom as payments and depreciation and maintenance. They've accumulated a pile of liabilities expertly dressed up to look like success, and they don't hold a single boring asset doing the patient heavy lifting in the background where it counts. I keep returning to one simple picture because it makes the whole thing land. 2 people, same neighborhood, nearly identical incomes. The first one drives the modest car, lives a notch below their means, and quietly routes a meaningful chunk of every paycheck into investments before the money ever touches their checking account. The second one drives the better car, wears the better clothes, posts the better photos, takes the better trips, and invests nothing at all. For a good while, the second person genuinely looks like the one who's winning, and the first one can even look a little behind. Give it 10 years, though, and the race isn't remotely close. The boring one is sitting on real money and real freedom. The flashy one is sitting on a pile of memories, a stack of payments, and a closet full of stuff that's worth a fraction of what they paid. Here's the brutal arithmetic running underneath the whole scene. A person earning a comfortable income who consistently invests a real slice of it can build hundreds of thousands of dollars, even past $1 million, over a couple of decades, purely from ordinary market returns compounding on ordinary contributions. Nothing fancy required, no secret, no lucky stock pick. The person earning the identical income who invests nothing ends up with a beautiful photo archive and very little else to show for it. And the difference between those two destinies is not income, because remember, they earned exactly the same amount. The only difference is whether they spent their money buying assets or spent it buying the mere appearance of having assets. So when you're trying to spot fake rich in the wild, train yourself to look straight past everything you can see and ask the one invisible question that actually matters. What does this person own that makes money? If the honest answer is nothing, you've just learned everything you need to know about all the visible stuff too. Number 2, they are physically incapable of saying no. Watch a fake rich person operate inside a group, and you'll start to notice a pattern. They never, ever opt out. There's a weekend trip being planned, and they're instantly in, even when every signal in their financial life says they shouldn't be. A round of drinks gets ordered for the table, and they lunge for the check, even when their account genuinely cannot absorb the hit. A friend upgrades their phone, their couch, their car, and within a few short weeks, our fake rich friend has matched it or topped it. Saying no, even one single time, would crack the carefully maintained image, and that image is the thing they're protecting above everything else, including, sadly, their own future. This is the hidden engine driving almost every other sign on this entire list. It's social pressure, plain and simple, and it has become genuinely vicious in 2026 because the comparison machine now never switches off. It used to be that you only really measured yourself against the neighbors on your street and the coworkers down the hall. Now the feed is an infinite scrolling parade of people who all appear to be doing dramatically better than you, the overwhelming majority of whom are secretly running the exact same fake rich playbook of financing and renting and posting and pretending. Everyone is performing for everyone else simultaneously, and almost nobody is actually winning. Picture an entire room full of people all pretending to be rich, every one of them quietly going broke trying to keep pace with everyone else's pretending. That's a lot of the internet right now. Real wealth has a genuine superpower in this exact situation, and it's almost laughably simple. It's the ability to be the person who calmly says, "You know what? I'll sit this one out." Genuinely secure people skip things constantly and without drama. They drive the old car for a few more years. They wear the same coat through another winter. They let a trend come and go without participating. Not because they couldn't afford to join in, but because they've got absolutely nothing left to prove to anyone. And that deep freedom from the need to prove anything is, ironically and beautifully, a big part of what allowed them to become wealthy in the first place. The fake rich person, by contrast, experiences the word no as a small death every time. Picture the moment the dinner bill lands in the middle of the table. The secure person at that table will happily split it down the middle without a flicker of stress. The fake rich person grabs it before anyone else can, waving off the protests, insisting, performing generosity they can't actually afford, because being seen as the one who pays is worth more to them in that instant than the $300 it just quietly added to a credit card balance. Each individual yes feels tiny and harmless in the moment. A dinner here, a trip there, one more little upgrade because everyone else is doing it. But those yeses stack, relentlessly, week after week, into a life with no margin and no exit and no air, where every future dollar is already promised away to a decision made to impress someone who, if we're being completely honest, probably wasn't even paying that close attention to begin with. Number 1. The math never adds up, and neither does the calm. This is the master sign, the one that quietly ties every other sign together, and once you truly understand it, the entire act simply falls apart in front of you the moment you encounter it. Strip away the car, strip away the clothes, the posts, the constant money talk, the rented backdrops. What you're left with at the bottom is a very simple equation. Money coming in, money going out. And for the fake rich person, that equation is always quietly screaming somewhere underneath the surface. The visible part of their life keeps getting more and more expensive, while the invisible part, the savings, the assets, the breathing room, keeps shrinking toward absolute zero. They're surrounded by glittering evidence of wealth and buried in invisible debt at the very same time, which sounds like a contradiction until you realize the evidence of wealth is the exact thing generating the debt. Every flex is funded by the precise mechanism that's sinking them. The nicer the photos manage to get, the worse the actual spreadsheet looks behind the scenes. They've built a beautiful house with no foundation, and they're spending all their energy painting the shutters. But the deepest tell of all isn't even financial. It's emotional, and you can genuinely feel it radiating off a person if you slow down and pay attention. It's the total absence of calm. Picture two people quietly checking their bank balance on their phones. The first one does it with a hard knot in their stomach, silently praying the number is high enough to cover the charges that have already gone through, sitting two missed paychecks away from genuine crisis, no matter how flawless things look from the outside. The second one checks the very same balance with a kind of quiet, almost boring confidence, because they've got months of expenses tucked safely away, money invested and working, and a life that quietly costs less than it appears to. One of those two people earns more money. The other one sleeps far better at night. Only one of them is actually rich, and it is genuinely not always the one you'd assume from looking. That's the one thing the costume can never quite manage to cover up. You can finance the car. You can rent the mansion by the hour for a photo. You can split your groceries into 4 payments and pass off a $30 dupe as the genuine article. What you cannot fake, not really, not for long, is the simple feeling of not being afraid of your own money. Real wealth, underneath all the noise and all the logos, is just freedom and quiet, the ability to handle a bad week with a shrug. Fake rich is the precise opposite of that, wearing dramatically better clothes. It's a loud, expensive, genuinely exhausting performance, with a thin current of fear running underneath the whole production every minute of every day. So now you've got the complete list, all 10 signs, and you can probably already picture a few specific people in your life. Maybe, if you're being really honest with yourself, you caught a quick glimpse of your own reflection in one or two of them. If you did, here's what I want you to understand. That little flicker of recognition, that quiet, oh no, that's actually kind of me feeling, is not something to feel ashamed about for even a second. It's the single most useful thing that can possibly happen to you, because every last one of the signs we just walked through traces back to one shared root cause. And the root cause isn't greed, and it isn't stupidity, and it isn't a lack of willpower. It's that almost nobody ever sat us down and taught us how money actually works. Think honestly about it. We get handed credit cards, car loans, those little installment buttons at checkout, and an entire bottomless internet full of people loudly performing wealth they don't have. And almost none of us were ever walked through the basics of any of it. How debt actually compounds against you over time. What truly counts as an asset versus what's quietly a liability dressed up as a treat. Why the boring, patient investor quietly wins the long game while the flashy spender slowly drowns in plain sight. The people who never once fall for the fake rich trap. The ones radiating that calm and that freedom we keep coming back to, usually aren't smarter or luckier than anyone else. They simply got the foundation right early on, and then everything good in their financial life grew naturally out of that single head start. The flashy spender and the quiet builder often start in the exact same place, with the exact same paycheck. The only thing that separates them, years down the line, is whether anyone ever explained the rules of the game before they started playing it. So if any of this landed a little too close to home today, the move is absolutely not to feel embarrassed and click away. The move is to go back and finally lay the groundwork that probably should have been laid for you years ago, through no fault of your own. That's the exact reason I sat down and put together a full video walking through financial literacy from the absolute ground up. The real starting line before any of the fancier money topics even begin to make sense. Of everything on this channel, that's the one I genuinely point a friend toward first, because it's the quiet difference between spending the rest of your life performing wealth for strangers and actually, slowly, building the real thing for yourself. Every single sign we talked through today gets so much easier to escape once that foundation is finally in place underneath you. Start there, get the basics solid, and I promise you the calm we keep talking about starts to follow on its own.